Hi guys, first thing I'm going to do is to burn the lights, and then you will see the reason is because then I'm going to apply a very diluted filter that will only affect the highest lights by filtering. So if you want to do a technique like this that will not affect the shadows almost, it will affect the lights. So it's better if you can highlight, overexpose the lights, considering that then it will be affected by the paint and it will go down. Those are Chimera paints. This is a gift from our friends from Pegaso. It's a brand where I have participated, as you can see in the original idea. Look how beautiful it looks like. It's always I'm grateful that they recognize my part on this, because I didn't participate on the mixes or the design of the paints, but the original idea was started on top of an idea I gave to them. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you guys from Pegaso. The paints, they're really good. That's the truth. The texture of those figures of those paints, sorry, it's a little bit sandy, like sand, you know. It looks porous, so it will help us to filter on top, because the color that we will filter with the airbrush will settle down very nicely. So these colors from Chimera are really good for covering, right? Because the colors settle down really well. The thickness, the viscosity is really nice, and I'm mixing in this case this Chimera color, this white, with some kind of yellow from Reaper, which is a matte color. Normally I never use pure white, or I keep the pure white for the really last stages, but I don't used to use pure white for the intermediate steps. So I'm going to enhance the maximum shiny areas where I want to accumulate the light. So this will also help me to flatten the surface, as it has been treated very roughly, and the surface is not completely flat. The subject about density is something that not many people speak about, because most of the miniature painters thinks that everything should be flat and diluted, while this is not true. You know, if you're a painter, you will know that thickness and this creamy feeling is something interesting for many purposes. In this case, when I apply the color, I apply it creamy, with thickness, with viscosity, and then with the brush humid, I can make some kind of wet spreading or wet blending somehow. So using this creamy property of the color, you will not affect the inner properties of the color, because as soon as you dilute, obviously you will reduce the strength of the color. While if you apply it with his full viscosity, you will not lose these properties. So we're using the pure color. We will explain all these things in many other videos. So because the concept, again, I always repeat, is a concept of an academy. So you will see many things, and many times I will explain about those features of the different materials, in this case the paints. So don't run away from viscosity, from thickness. Thickness on the paint, if it's well spread, is something very interesting to play with. The face is, it looks like Francesco Totti, as you might appreciate probably, but it's very flat in terms of volumes. So I will suggest you, if you are a painter, if you are not only a colorist, if you're a colorist, obviously you will just paint the volume as it is. If you're a painter, you will modify the volume to your own taste, right? So indeed, to me, those faces that are a little more flat, however is in this case is a little bit too flat, but those flat surfaces to me is perfect because I can redraw, I can reinterpret the volumes to my own taste, right? And I'm interpreting these volumes in a very geometrical way, and then I will make it more rounded. Don't worry for this. The colors are working really, really well. I think that for this creamy kind of work, because the pigment is very thin and it has a really good coverage, the colors are fantastic. You can extend them really, really well. I just want to say that we are not sponsored by Pegaso for this video. We have used this just to try because I'm testing the colors. So if I find something that I don't like, I will tell it anyway. Indeed, the thing that I like the less is that the fluidity is not as fluid as I used to work with, as I used to like. But the viscosity is really, really interesting. So the truth is that before entering into the airbrush process, to be more efficient in your process, I suggest you to work a little bit more on the different patches, the different tiles of colors, blocks of colors with the brush. And you can use the airbrush only for the final blending. However, you can use it in any moment of the process, and that's the reason why I speak so much and why I explain so many things, to give you the idea that painting process is always a process that it's alive. So you cannot just copy something. You have to adapt what you're seeing to your own way of painting, right? As you see, I'm taking the progression down with the brush, with some kind of rubbing technique. Keep these words for all the videos. You know, when I'm like just like rubbing, I think rubbing is a right word to describe this. You see that I'm tinting the surface and I'm making it the intermediate tones with a more reddish feeling, generating bridge tones, tonalities in between different patches of colors to get all those tonalities coming together somehow, right? And creating this feeling of transition. And transition and blending is not the same thing, right? Blending will be a perfect gradient, while transition is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But also could be 1, 3, 5, 7, but also could be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1. So it depends, you know, it depends on how refined you want to be, right? I don't need a perfect transition here, I just need a transition. And this is very important because what I want to make is something that is understandable by the viewer at one side, right? I'm going to use now this evolution, which is a gift from Cult of Paint, our friends from the UK, Andy Wardell and company. They send us this gift to try it. It comes in his own box. It's a very beautiful toy. It's not the kind of airbrush I'm used to it, but I'm gonna try it. Look this case for with Andy showing his beautiful muscles. It's a sex symbol. We love you, Andy. You are so sexy. I don't know if I can paint, or I prefer to just to watch your beautiful picture. the lead from the pod is really nice as well with this touch, and it's a big lead, so you can it's a bit pod, sorry, so you can use this to make big mixtures, and maybe, for example, this airbrush could be really nice for wargaming purposes if you want to paint several figs, or for big figures. So I will use this kind of airbrush for big works, big blendings, big big textures. So yeah, the trigger goes really well. I don't know if it will be as precise as is my Iwata. I have my doubts. But I will not do a detailed work, so if you see me failing, it doesn't matter. One advice is that you have to understand that all these tools are like the car, like a gun. If you have shot, you will know what I'm talking about. that you have to tame like a car as well, like a motorcycle, like any machine that you have to use as an extension of your own body somehow. You have to get used to it, and this takes time. Francesco Farabi told me that those Chimera colors you can dilute it with water for airbrush. I don't know if this is the 100% something that they can rely, because normally every pigment, every acrylic pigment, you can dilute it with water, but most of the times you need a thinner to avoid that the airbrush will get dirty very very quickly. So well, if I fail, I'm sorry. It's a new tool, new paints, new pigments, new airbrush. So I might fail drastically maybe. So please excuse me for that. But as my commitment with the students is to show them a real process and not something fake edited. If I fail, we will leave the failure, so you can see where I fail and why I fail. We're going to dilute it, but we have to measure well the amount of dilution, because most of the times people think that everything has to be diluted, which is a big failure of understanding that we drag from the old times when there was the knowledge about painting in the miniature world was not so developed somehow. But you need also some density at some point. So you have to play with the density to see until when you feel comfortable with that dilution, and then you can apply it comfortably. I'm not used to this kind of trigger and this kind of dilution, so I will probably fail. I'm also testing, and I'm failing, and I think it's very interesting that you see my failures. Indeed, here I'm loading with a reddish tone the chest area with the intermediate tones. I'm going to try to filter an intermediate tones to generate more intermediate tones and make the progression of the color richer. So this is what I'm doing with the airbrush. So what I do is I drag the trigger backwards, and then I push the trigger frontwards. So I throw paint and then I dry paint. And the movements could be linear, circular, but don't stay in the same point all the time. Don't stay still in the same time. You have to move to distribute the color. Otherwise, you can find spider webs that are very useful for certain things, because most of the people think that airbrush is only to blend, and that is completely bullshit. You can use airbrush for many different purposes. Indeed, I use the spider web very often to generate some textures for big surfaces like capes or things like this. If you want to control also the airbrush, you have to play also with the different air pressure. I never know if it's how you call it in English. In Spanish, I know atmósferas or bares. So I don't know how to call it, sincerely. Atmospheres. Well, I will do it. Do you see the difference that now is doing like this stippling technique? Imagine how many things you can do with that. Like, for example, doing like skin filling, with this like porous filling, or to paint a terrain for generating rocks or sand or a wool cape or even leather, or I don't know. This is up to your imagination, and I think that you, as students of this academy, you have to make something by your side as well, which is at least while you're watching these videos, reflecting and thinking, hey, that's interesting, I will be able to apply this maybe there, and there. And maybe then you fail, but at least you are making exercise with the brain, which is always healthy, I promise you guys. Much better than just copy someone who is telling you do this with step 1, do this with step 2, do this step 3, and then this is the result. That's not true, guys. No matter if you don't want to trust me or not, I'm telling you the truth. I don't hide anything. So we're going to generate some kind of texture. You see that is a little bit pointy somehow, like pointy, like grainy. Sorry, grainy. So it generates a certain texture, which is due to many factors. The low pressure of the let's say compressor, the kind of pigment I'm using, the way I use the airbrush. So there are many factors. So if that happens, you can use it in your favor. I'm not a master with airbrush, you know. I remember when I was working in Andrea or Night Models that I was more used to use constantly this tool because it was a very important part of my processes. Now, not so much. So I get rusted in my technique with the airbrush somehow. Well, during these periods in Andrea Miniatures and Night Models, I developed many different techniques with the airbrush. Most of them that I found them by accident. And then I thought, whoa, that could be used for that could be used for this. This is part of the intelligence of an artist, you know, how to use the resources that you find along the way, and then how to use them in your favor, right? So if you see that this happened, like for example, that is generating spider webs, you can spit more air, and you remove that paint. Again, this is related with pressure of the air that I have not tamed yet the airbrush, so I'm still not used to it. I still not used to the pigment, so I don't know what is the exact dilution I have to use. And also the tip of the brush, the dispersion, the spreading of the paint is not what I'm used to it. As you can see, is different. This small opening for the cap. Maybe it's useful. Maybe Andy Ward will use it probably perfectly. I'm still not used to it, so I'm not comfortable. But I will use that so you can see my own experience about this airbrush. So you can see also how I tame slowly the tool. And this is not a tale. You know, this is not something I'm inventing. This is something true. Truth is the same as sometimes when you're using a brand new brush. You don't feel really comfortable with it, and after a week you start feeling comfortable because it get adapted to your own brushstroke, to your own movement, to your own pressure, to your own dilution, to your own the thickness of the paint. You know, so tools has to be adapted to yourself, right? So in this case also my technique was what I was saying before. Sorry, because I'm dubbing and I'm speaking a lot in the Spanish version, and I have to dub almost at the same time. It's not easy. What I wanted to say is that I have lost my training with airbrush. So my use of airbrush is very mediocre right now. It's not something amazing, right? But this is like any sports. If you play football and then you stop playing for 2 years and then you return, you will never feel comfortable until you restart the training, right? And also because I don't need precision right now, so I will not be obsessed with this, because right now if the airbrush speed or create some texture, I think that it will give me even something interesting, right? So it's not something that bothers me right now too much because we are in a very initial stage. So I'm not using it for refinement. And obviously, as I said, there are some other masters like Pepa, like especially Julio Cabos, people that I have seen working in person, especially Julio Cabos. That was one of my first masters, if not the first, in Andrea Miniatures almost 14 or 13 years ago. And this guy is a beast using the airbrush. You know, he's super precise. He never fails. But he uses it constantly, right? While me, I use it for intermediate effects and not for final refinement. So, well, it's not a problem. You can use it to your own taste or in the way that is more useful for you. If you see that I'm generating some texture, this will never go against me, because then I can reduce this texture by flattening the paint on top with brush, and also it will help me to create a texture that imitates somehow this kind of guy with a skin that has been exposed to the sun and to the different ambiances, right, to the weather. So it won't be super smooth. It will be a little bit like grainy, like done with stippling techniques. That it's something that you can imitate by your own with brush, by stippling, but also you can generate by failing with airbrush, right? And I know that many of you will be used to see all those examples on Instagram or Facebook where you see 1, 2, 3 finished, with painters that they never have any failure, with painters that everything looks super smooth, and well, guys, think twice and think that every painter fails. No matter how master you are, how big master you are, you will fail, right? And failure is part of the process, and you have to embrace this. You have to adapt your painting to your failures, or adapt your failures to your painting. Both works, right? But in my case, for example, I'm not a perfect painter. I will never be. I think I'm a more complete painter than many others that maybe are better than me in a very specific technical aspect. But I think that, at least for me, this is my very own opinion, is more useful to have more resources, so then you can enjoy it more, because you can choose between many different ways to resolve the quiz. And this is what I'm trying to show you in this academy. Because in this case, I don't know how these paints behave. I'm adapting myself to what I'm seeing in this live process, right? So I will improve the use of these paints over the different processes, right? So sorry if I fail. Like, for example, now in the chest you can see this kind of glowing. This is a failure, right? But it's not a problem. Indeed, you have seen probably the finished piece, and I'm very proud of it. It looks fantastic, and if I fail, why I will hide this from the students? Wouldn't it be a little bit fake if I do that? I want you to see all the steps of the process, and I want you to see that when I fail, there is a way to resolve this failure, right? And that sometimes this failure leads me to a new point, right? So that's the reason why we're keeping the video like this. So I think that it's interesting for you as a student that you see the reality, the real reality, not the fake reality, the real reality of a professional painting studio, where there are many moments where the painters, even if you are the most technical guy in the world, you will have brain headache, because you don't know how to resolve some issues, right? If you were a more, let's say, more neat painter, more specialized on blendings, or more specialized on technical aspect, maybe you will probably mask the different elements to use the airbrush. That's something that Ángel Giraldez does. That's something that Julio Cabos does. People that really, they use the airbrush in a very good way, and they are very neat in the process. They paint different areas almost until the end, while my way of painting is maybe a little bit more painterly, but just different. Then you can use your own. Nothing is better. Nothing is worse. It's just differences between styles, or differences between taste, or differences between how every professional painter feels comfortable on their own process, right? And I prefer to be a little bit more chaotic, but to be able to see everything at once. I'm going to try the Chimera paints, or this mixture of Reaper and Chimera paints with thinner from Skill 75. Thinners always have a little bit of alcohol or a lot of alcohol, so they help the paint to be diluted in a more regular way. So can you do it with water? Yes. But you can also do it with thinner, and the result is a little bit different. You have to try yourself. Like, for example, me, when I was working in night models, I used to use many golden acrylic paints because it was the time when we discovered them. They already existed, obviously. And we discovered them, and we introduced this on the miniature general, how can I say, the tools that are already icons from the miniature world. I don't know how to explain this in English, sorry. That started in night models because beforehand, nobody in the miniature world used this, or at least nobody of the professional side, right? And we discovered that these paints, the golden acrylics, they were really intense, really interesting, with a very intense pigment, but they had to be diluted with something stronger than water with airbrush. So we used to use pure isopropylic alcohol in the mixture, a little bit of water and a little bit of isopropylic alcohol. The thinners were not strong enough to dilute them in a good way, right? So it depends on the different brands what will be the best diluent or the best thinner, right? You see now you cannot see obviously the speed of the airbrush, but you can see how the chest is starting to get more, not smooth, but I will say more progressive in terms of tonalities. And I'm mainly affecting the midtones, because if I go over the lights, I will tint them very quickly as the level of value is higher, so it will absorb the color very easily. So I will tint the midtones, a little bit of the shadows, and just a hint of the last lights, and you will see that I'm generating new tones. The truth is that the grip of the evolution, I don't like it very much, sincerely. It's a little bit uncomfortable. Indeed, if you see the Iwata, the grip is much more natural to me. Like, for example, some of the fingers looks that they don't have any supportive area, right? So I think the design of the Iwata is much more ergonomic, plus the fact that it has no rubber inside, so it doesn't get rust to it. But maybe this evolution could be more for, I don't know, like something more, I'm gonna say like more a thick job, not so precise, or at least for me, because the grip is not so comfortable. I really like the trigger. This is really cool, indeed. And it helps the traction, the backward traction. I will probably do a video about differences between airbrushes. If you find this interesting, please leave it in the comment box, saying literally this, like, Banshee, do a video about differences between different brands of airbrushes, and I will pick 3 or 4 so you can see. Indeed, you can suggest me the different models. Now that we get closer, you can see how I am tinting also a little bit the lights, but especially the midtones, and it's creating this kind of foggy feeling. Then we will work with brush and we will reduce this, but I'm gaining more temperature. I'm warming it up. Sorry, this sunny feeling of the Mediterranean sun. We need this orange. Otherwise, the last lights will be too clear and too desaturated. So I want to create this southern feeling, you know? And that's the reason why I'm not using only yellow. I'm using this orange, because orange is always more interesting. It keeps the luminosity of the yellow, but it's more alive than the yellow because it has red. So now you can make your own mental composition, understanding the colors. This is color theory, guys. It's so alive. Orange is not so alive, but it's very alive, like red, because it's inside of him. And it's very luminous, like yellow. So I will be affecting the flesh tone, adding this and making it more sunny feeling, right? And now with this kind of light skin tone that you can see that it looks completely different in the pot of the airbrush than in the paper. And this is something that you have to take into account and to relate this, because at some point when you will get used to it, you will be able to guess more or less which color will appear when you throw it to the surface. That will be different to the color that you see in the pot. And now I will start smoothing the transition between the pure intermediate tone and the maximum light areas. Sometimes it speeds. If that happens, again, I'm not the best airbrush painter. However, I have controlled it in the past, but now I don't feel completely comfortable. But because I rely on my brush technique, I don't care so much. If this was a more refining work, I will probably move to my traditional Iwata, which is more precise. Also, it has a smaller tip. I think it's a 0.2 or something like this. And if I need precision, I will practice first. This is the same as when you're doing freehands, right? My problem is that I don't paint very much, indeed. However, you see me every month. I don't paint so much because I have other tasks, other duties, like sculpting, designing, like things related with Patreon, things related with courses. So at the end, I'm not so trained in this element. And I feel much more comfortable with brush, and also with brush you can be much more refined. This is like a car at the end, you only feel comfortable with your own car or with a super expensive one. You see that it's spitting sometimes, also because I normally work with a very high pressure. If you want to reduce this risk, you can reduce also the pressure of the compressor. That's up to you. But I always remember one learning from one of my first art directors, who was the art director of Night Models. And he always told me, Alfonso, it's better if you use a very high pressure, because when you get used to high pressure, then it's easier to work in slow pressure, or in low pressure, sorry. This is the same, like if you get used to drive a car at very high speed, then being in a very slow traffic is something super easy, maybe boring. It can look that I'm searching for excuses, but it's not. I mean, I'm just showing you factors that can bother you in your own process. Again, if you're interested on these kind of things that can happen, failures that can happen during an airbrush session, you can also comment this on the comment box. Like, Alfonso or Banshee, please do this video about possible failures or possible errors while we are doing an airbrushing, when we are airbrushing, and we will take notes of it and do it as soon as possible. So these things can happen. This is not a drama. Well, obviously, if I were Peppa, because she is the master of the universe, with the airbrush, maybe I will be worried. But, if you're a regular mortal with the airbrush, that can happen. Nothing wrong. And, in one side, you can do this by brush as well, right? But the truth is that the noise, the texture, the marks that the airbrush leaves are very specific, and that you cannot imitate it with brush, or at least it will be very difficult to imitate, right? And also that it will take more time, obviously. With an airbrush, covering colors is something very, very fast. So you can see that now I'm using the own paint from the airbrush. That's why you don't see my hand trespassing the screen of the palette. And I'm applying these mid-tones from the pot of the airbrush, which is already diluted with thinner, obviously, to refine a little bit. And then I can add a little bit of this red on the ear, which is an area where the skin is so thin that normally it's a little bit translucent, a little bit not transparent, translucent, and that's why this has this bloody feeling, because the light comes through or trespass the ear and generate this reddish feeling. You can see that this has some kind of hollow feeling, this foggy feeling, but it's not a problem because then we will refine with airbrush, and as soon as we start coloring the different elements, you will reduce this feeling. To me, those are intermediate tools that I use for speeding up the process. And in this case, that has been a video showing you how to apply a tone. With this, obviously, that you can use this technique at any moment. But if you, I would say even more, if you use it, I'm going to clean the airbrush a little bit. If you use it for this color blocking, this color tiling technique, it will be very useful, of course. I just clean it with isopropylic alcohol and a towel, paper towel. I would like to know. I would like to know if you don't like to see those failures, right? Because if you don't find them interesting, please feel free to comment in the comment box. Because for us, it's even easier. We can remove all the failures, and then you see like a super clean process, and that's it. So I beg you to make some comments, right? But also, if you're interested on seeing the failures, please give us a comment, because this is a guide for us. We can rely on your feedback to know if we are doing the right thing, or maybe you have lost 45 minutes of your life. We don't want this, obviously, guys. You are very important for us. And you are our students, and we want you to learn in the best way. We're going to use this ultramarine blue, which is some kind of ink. It's not properly an ink, but it's an airbrush color. It's very intense, very rich. Not so much as Dowler-Rowney or Liquitex inks or something like this, but it's super, super intense indeed. It's a very rich color, as you can see. It's very strong, very strong. And if this happens, sometimes I add a lot of pigment and it's too much. Well, I discard it and I restart, no problem. Now I have this blue in the pot, in the walls of the pot, and I can use this. These things happen. Obviously, you can take a picker and go drop by drop, and then you will fail less. But failure, again, give you conclusions, and conclusions are always something good. I want a very deep purple, and that's the reason why I use this mixture between this purple from Citadel. You can use any other purple that looks similar. And I have added this blue to make it deeper. Again, color theory, guys. And this color will help me to integrate the shadows with the intermediate tones, with the mid-tones. I'm going to remove this upper part that it's very rough, very abrupt. So I will just use this some kind of like orangey flesh tone, it's a mid-tone, and I will remark the upper volumes. And then I will see what I will do. Maybe I will smooth it, maybe not, I don't know. You see that the airbrush work is a very short movement, almost like a circular movement, where I am throwing paint and then drying paint. If you tint the mid-tones, nothing happens, nothing wrong happens. It's part of the process, don't worry. You see, I do it from the bottom. You see that the direction of the let's say the spraying of the airbrush is different. Now I'm moving, I'm rotating and inclining the figure, so then I can affect with the airbrush to the shadow areas and also the mid-tones. And also, this will enhance the shadows. It will give me depth in the shadows because of the blue, but also it will give me, and this is again color theory, guys, it will give me this complementary color game because the last lights are a little bit yellowish and the shadows tends to go to this purpley feeling. So yellow against purple, we have this color theory, guys, this contrast again. And you will see how this purple helps me to push the light even more and to perceive the light even more, more strong, even stronger. Some people tell me that the color theory is complex, and yeah, obviously it's complex. That's the reason why this is my job. Same as if I ask you in your own job, maybe you are a mechanic. Last week my car was broken, and when I have received the comment from the mechanic, it looks very complex. Then maybe it's not so much. I don't know, but obviously that's the reason why I'm a teacher, and that's the reason why you are learning, because it's not something super easy. But if you follow my reasoning, you will start understanding the colors much better. So now I have to rework the volumes because now the interpretation is not very interesting. It's just a transition, which is the main failure, and this is a very important tip, is the main failure of most of the painters, that they stay there in a pure transition without reinterpreting the volumes. So now the volumes are more or less well in a good progression, well blended more or less, but they're not interesting enough. So we have to regain this volumetric interpretation that you will see in the next video. Thank you for watching, guys. I think that was an interesting video in terms of seeing this filtering technique on top of color blocking. Remember that first I overexpose the highlights because I know that then it will go down as soon as I filter the midtones. Then I have worked with the midtones, then I have worked with the shadows, and then we will rework with brush. I have shown you all those failures or those errors with the airbrush, so then you can also learn from that, and give me all your feedback in the comments, please, so we can know if this is useful for you or if you want us to skip those failing moments. However, I think that they should be very useful and very illustrative for you. Bye bye.